She had nothing, not even sight, but her voice carried a light the world could not ignore. One song, one moment, and a cold billionaire's life would change forever. From the streets of Lagos to the halls of power, can a poor blind girl teach a man how to love? The Poor Girl Who Taught a Billionaire. How to Love, a story of hope, sacrifice, and true love. Don't miss this touching story. Like, share, and subscribe for more. Evening settled slowly over Lagos, and the wind pressed against the thin zinc roof of the small house at the edge of the city. The roof rattled like an old tin tray. The walls were cracked. The door leaned on tired hinges, always ready to fall. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of kerosene and old dust. Amara sat on a low wooden stool near the doorway. She held a small tin cup in both hands. Her fingers were careful and slow, as if the cup could vanish if she moved too fast. Amara was 17. She was blind, but she had learned to read the world with sound, smell, and touch. She knew which neighbor was passing by from the rhythm of footsteps. She knew when the sky was heavy because the wind went quiet. She knew the road outside by the grit that came in on bare feet. Her stepmother, Madame Nkechi, moved around the one-room house with a hard, fast step. Two boys, her sons, Chike and Nonso, sat near the window whispering and laughing. The boys liked to joke about Amara. They liked to hide her slippers. They liked to push her towards the low ledge by the door and then laugh when she caught herself with shaking hands. "Did you wash the plates?" Madame Nkechi asked. "Yes, Ma," Amara said. "Did you sweep?" "Yes, Ma." "Then go and fetch water. The last jerry can is almost empty. Should I die of thirst while you sit and breathe?" Amara stood and reached for the yellow jerrycan by the door. It was heavy when full but light now. She traced her fingers along the plastic handle and lifted it. The handle bit into her palm. She stepped out into the evening. The ground was rough and cool. Dust rose around her ankles. The road to the public tap was short but busy. Traders were closing their tables. A radio in a nearby kiosk played a gospel song. A generator coughed itself awake. Okada riders shouted for space. Amara knew this path. She kept to the left side where the ground sloped gently. Her cane, an old broomstick cut to size, tapped ahead of her, finding stones, drains, and the edges of broken concrete. "Make way," someone said, not unkindly. A wheelbarrow rattled past. She stepped aside. At the tap, a small line had formed. Women spoke in quick voices about the price of rice and the rain that had not fallen for days. Amara listened. She did not join the talk. She set the jerrycan down and waited. When it was her turn, she placed the mouth under the tap and turned the metal handle. Water splashed and hissed. She felt the jerrycan grow heavier. Her arms tensed. She shut the tap and dragged the can to one side. Someone bumped her shoulder. "Sorry," the person said. "It is fine," Amara replied, smiling a little. She lifted the jerrycan again and began the walk home. The weight pressed into her bones. She stopped twice to rest. She heard the sound of a big car on the main road, smooth and strong, not like the noisy Danfo buses. The sound faded. She reached the door and pushed it open with her foot. "You are slow," Madame Nkechi said. "Cheek is thirsty. Pour him water." Amara nodded and poured a cup for Cheeky. He took it without thanks. Nonso made a small clicking sound with his tongue. She said nothing. She set the jerrycan down and rubbed her palm where the handle had cut her skin. In the corner stood a small mat where Amara slept. Beside it lay a plastic bag that held her few clothes. There was also a scarf she loved because it was soft, not because she could see its color. Sometimes she tied it around her eyes to keep the dust out when the wind grew wild. "Tomorrow," Madame Nkechi said, "you will go to the junction and sing. People pity a girl like you. Bring money. The landlord came today. He wants his rent. Do you hear me?" "Yes, Ma." "And do not come back with coins only." "Do you think I feed you for nothing?" Amara felt a quiet ache in her chest. She was grateful for a place to sleep, even if the roof leaked. She was grateful for food, even if it was small Gary at night. But she knew that in this house, love was measured in money and chores. She had not felt a soft hand on her face for a long time. She lay on her mat after they ate. The stew was watery but warm. She listened to the city, distant horns, A baby crying 2 houses away. Laughter that floated on the wind and then broke apart. The generator next door went silent, and the darkness grew deeper, even for someone who could not see. In the darkness, she held a different world in her heart. In that world, she was not a burden. She was a person with a voice that made people stop and breathe. She had learned to sing when she was small, before her mother died. Her mother's voice had been gentle, like rain on leaves. "Your voice is your light," her mother had told her once. "When the world closes its eyes to you, sing, and it will open them again." Amara hummed now, soft and careful, so Madame Nkechi would not hear and scold her for wasting time. The melody was simple. It moved like a small stream around stones. Her throat loosened. Her breathing became even. She sang about morning coming after night. She sang about a bird that found its way home without eyes just by the feel of the wind. A sudden fear touched her. What if tomorrow no one stopped to listen? What if she returned with only coins and more harsh words? She pressed her hands together and whispered a small prayer. "God, please, let tomorrow be kind." Outside, a car passed again, the smooth one she had heard before. She imagined it, black perhaps, with quiet power. She did not know that inside such a car, a man with a cold face and a restless heart would soon hear her voice. She did not know that her song, planted tonight like a seed, would lead to a road she could not yet imagine. She turned on her side and pulled the soft scarf to her cheek. The floor was hard, but sleep came like a slow wave. In the last seconds before she drifted away, she felt the roof shake once more in the wind, as if the house itself was taking a long, tired breath and preparing for morning. The next morning came with noise. Lagos did not wake gently. It rose with engines, horns, and the cries of traders calling their goods. Amara sat on her mat, tying her scarf carefully. She traced her fingers across the edges until the knot felt secure. Madame Nkechi was already shouting at Chike and Nonso to hurry with their chores. "Amara," the stepmother called, "take your stick. Go to the junction. Don't waste time. People are moving to work now. That is when they have money to give." "Yes, Ma," Amara answered softly. She reached for her broomstick cane and stepped outside. The sun was already warm. The broken zinc roof rattled a farewell behind her as she felt her way to the main road. The junction was busy, filled with Danfo buses painted yellow, shouting conductors hanging from doors, and Okada riders weaving between cars. Sellers with trays of groundnuts, gala, and chilled water on their heads shouted for buyers. Everyone seemed to be rushing somewhere. Amara knew her corner. It was beside an old electric pole where the ground sloped a little. She tapped her stick along until she found it. She sat on the small stool she had carried and lifted her chin. The air smelled of exhaust, dust, and fried akara. She opened her mouth and began to sing. Her voice was soft at first, but it grew stronger, rising above the chaos of the street. The song was simple, a hymn her mother had once taught her. It spoke of hope, of light breaking through dark clouds. People slowed. A woman selling oranges dropped a small coin into Amara's tin cup. A student, rushing for a bus, paused just long enough to listen before hurrying on. A man in a suit tossed in a crumpled note without looking back. "God bless you," Amara whispered after each gift. But not everyone was kind. "Go and find work," one conductor shouted as he jumped down from his bus. His voice was sharp with impatience. "You think singing is job?" Another boy laughed. "Blind girl, sing for me nah. Make I dance small." He clapped off beat, mocking her voice until the crowd pushed him away. Amara kept singing. She had learned to hold her song like a shield, letting it cover her when the world grew cruel. By noon, the sun grew fierce. Sweat trickled down her face. Her throat felt dry, but she kept going. She thought of her stepmother's warning. If she returned with too little money, she knew the punishment waiting. Suddenly, a gentle voice came close. "Sister, take water," the person said. A cold sachet of pure water was pressed into her hand. "Thank you," she whispered, holding it tight. She tore the edge and drank slowly, feeling the coolness spread inside her. When she lifted her head again, she noticed something. The noise of traffic had shifted. A car had pulled up close, its engine low and powerful. It did not rattle like the buses or roar like the Okadas. It purred, smooth and commanding. The smell of fresh leather drifted from the open window. Amara could not see it, but she knew this was no ordinary car. People nearby stopped to stare. The hum of whispers ran along the street. Inside the black SUV sat Michael Okoye. He was young, rich, and feared in business circles. His face was sharp, his eyes always cold, as if the world owed him something it could never repay. He had been on his way to a meeting, but the sound of a voice had cut through the noise of the road. A blind girl singing by the roadside. Something about the voice made him pause. It was pure, unshaken by the insults around her. It carried both sorrow and strength. "Sir," his driver asked, "should I move?" Michael did not answer immediately. He leaned slightly forward, his gaze fixed on Amara. He felt a strange pull, a question forming in his mind. How could someone with nothing sing as if she had everything? Amara, unaware of his eyes on her, continued. Her song floated above the dust and horns, weaving into the hearts of those who chose to listen. Michael's hand tapped once against the door. "Wait," he said finally. "Let me listen." The driver blinked in surprise but obeyed. That afternoon, as Amara sang under the Lagos sun, she did not know her voice had reached a man whose life was made of glass towers, boardrooms, and guarded walls. She did not know that her simple song had cracked something in him, a silence he had carried for years. Tomorrow the black SUV would stop again, and her world, though broken now, was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. The next day came heavy with heat. The Lagos sun rose early, pressing its fire on the rooftops. Amara woke before dawn, listening to the slow drip of water from a hole in the zinc roof. She lay still, gathering strength, before Madame Nkechi's harsh voice tore through the silence. "Amara! Are you deaf as well as blind? Go out early today. The landlord is coming back for rent. We need money." "Yes, Ma," Amara whispered, rising from her mat. She tied her scarf and reached for her stick. The floor was cold under her bare feet. She carried her small stool and tin cup out to the junction. By the time she settled near the old electric pole, Lagos was already alive. Conductors called for passengers. Hawkers lifted trays of ground nuts, bread, and chilled water. The air vibrated with urgency. Amara sat, rested her tin cup on her lap, and began to sing. Her voice was clear, steady, and strong. It cut through the horns and shouts like light through mist. Some people dropped coins. Others hurried past. She did not stop. She sang as though each note was prayer. Then once again came the sound, that low, smooth engine. The air seemed to shift around her. Amara's song wavered for a heartbeat, then grew firmer. She did not know why, but the presence of that car made her want to sing better, louder, as if the music itself could reach whoever sat inside. Michael Okoye leaned back in the leather seat of his black SUV. He wore a crisp navy suit, his wrist heavy with a silver watch. The tinted window shielded him from most eyes, but his gaze was fixed on the blind girl by the roadside. He had spent years building walls around himself. Walls of money, power, and silence. Nothing moved him anymore. Not the tall buildings he owned, not the expensive wine on his table, not the endless stream of people trying to please him. His heart had grown as cold as the glass towers where he ruled. But yesterday, for the first time in years, he had felt something. A tremor, a question, and today he returned to find it again. The driver shifted uneasily. "Sir, should we move?" "We're late for the meeting," Michael raised a hand. "Not yet." The driver pressed his lips together and obeyed. Amara finished her song, her breath coming soft and slow. Her tin cup rattled as someone dropped in a note. She whispered, "God bless you," then sat still, waiting for the road to breathe again. The sound of a car door opening startled her. She tilted her head, listening. The footsteps that followed were firm, confident, measured. They stopped directly in front of her. "Your voice," a deep, calm voice said, "is not ordinary." Amara's fingers tightened around her cup. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "What is your name?" "Amara." There was a pause. He seemed to weigh the name in his mouth before speaking again. "Do you sing here every day?" "Yes, sir." "To help my family. My stepmother sends me." Michael looked at her, really looked. Her dress was faded, torn at the edges. Dust clung to her bare feet. Yet her face held no bitterness, only gentleness. Without a word, he took a crisp note from his wallet and placed it in her cup. The sound of it folding against the tin was louder than the coins she usually received. Amara felt the difference at once. "Thank you, sir," she said again, her voice trembling. Michael studied her for another moment, then turned away. He stepped back into the SUV, and the driver shut the door behind him. The car rolled forward, blending once more into the storm of Lagos traffic. Amara sat frozen, her heart beating hard. She traced the note with her fingertips. It was thick, thicker than she was used to. She guessed it must be a high denomination, perhaps even the largest. Her lips parted in awe. One note like this could cover food for days. For the first time in a long while, she felt a small flame of hope. She did not know who the man was or why he had stopped. She only knew his voice carried both strength and sadness, and something told her he would return. In the car, Michael remained silent. His driver kept glancing at him through the mirror, but Michael's eyes were fixed on the road ahead. Why had he stopped? Why had he spoken to her? He had no answer. All he knew was that the blind girl's voice had done something strange. It had cracked open a door he thought he had locked forever. For the first time in years, Michael Okoye felt the weight of his own loneliness. And in the memory of her song, he heard something he had not known he was missing, a piece of love. That night, both Amara and Michael lay in their different worlds, one in a broken house, one in a mansion of glass, and thought of the brief encounter. Neither knew it was only the beginning of a story that would change them both forever. The morning sun burned bright over Lagos, pressing its heat into the restless streets. Amara stood at the junction once again, her stool steady beneath her, her cane by her side. She sang with a voice both soft and strong, weaving hymns and simple songs into the rush of horns and shouts. Her tin cup rattled as coins fell in, some with pity, others with kindness. Yet her heart was restless. Ever since the man with the calm, deep voice had spoken to her, she felt something had shifted. The crisp note he gave her still lay hidden in her scarf at home. It was more than money. It was proof that someone had truly listened. And today she heard it again. That smooth, powerful engine. The black SUV. Michael Okoye sat in the back of his SUV, his gaze once again fixed on the blind girl by the pole. He had told himself he was only curious, that he had meetings nearby, that stopping again was not unusual. But deep down he knew the truth. Her voice had stayed with him, even through long hours in boardrooms filled with men in suits. "Sir?" his driver asked, slowing near the junction. Michael nodded. "Stop." The driver obeyed, though his brows drew tight with surprise. Michael stepped out, his polished shoes meeting the dusty ground. The air was thick with exhaust and heat, but he hardly noticed. He walked straight toward the girl. Amara heard the footsteps before she smelled the faint scent of expensive cologne. Her heart skipped. She knew it was him. "Amara," the man said, his voice deep but not unkind. She turned her face slightly toward the sound. "Yes, sir." "I listened to you again today," he said. "You sing with something rare. Not just sound. You sing with your heart." Her fingers tightened around the tin cup. "Thank you, sir. It is all I have." Michael studied her for a long moment. The street noise seemed far away. He thought of his own world. Polished floors, shining chandeliers, and empty silence. For years, his mansion had been filled with everything except warmth. He had learned to bury his grief after losing his mother as a boy, and his heart had hardened in the process. But this girl, with nothing but her voice, had touched something he thought was long dead. "I want you to come with me," he said finally. Amara's lips parted in shock. "Sir?" "Not to beg," Michael added quickly. "Not to suffer here on the roadside. You don't belong in the dust. I can give you more. I can help you." The words fell on Amara like a sudden storm. She clutched her scarf, unsure. "But my stepmother, my brothers, they expect me back. If I do not return with money, they will be angry." Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your stepmother sends you here to suffer." "That is not family." Amara hesitated. She had always obeyed, always endured. To leave with a stranger, no matter how kind his voice sounded, felt dangerous. Yet something inside her whispered that this was not an ordinary encounter. It was a door opening. Her voice shook. "Why me, sir?" "You do not know me." Michael looked at her, his jaw tight. Because you remind me that life is not only business. Because you sing as though you have everything, when you have nothing. And he stopped himself, unwilling to reveal the loneliness he carried. I want you to come. Just for a while, you will be safe. The road roared around them, buses honking, traders shouting. But in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Amara's answer. She lowered her head. Fear pressed heavy on her chest. Yet beneath it was hope, a hope she had buried long ago. I will come, she whispered. Michael nodded once, firm. Good. He turned to his driver. Open the door. The driver's eyes widened but obeyed. Amara rose slowly, folding her cane against her body. Her hand trembled as she reached out. Michael stepped forward, letting her fingers brush his arm. She clung lightly, steadying herself. The crowd stared, whispering. A poor blind girl climbing into a billionaire's car. Some murmured envy, others suspicion. But Amara heard none of it. Her heart pounded too loudly. The SUV door closed with a soft thud. Amara sat on leather seats smoother than anything she had ever touched. The faint hum of the engine vibrated under her feet. She held her scarf tight against her chest, unsure if she was dreaming. Michael glanced at her once, then faced forward. His voice was calm, but inside he felt a strange rush, as though something had finally broken free. Take us home, he told the driver. As the SUV rolled away, leaving the junction behind, Amara felt the weight of her old life fade with each turn of the wheels. She did not know where this road would lead, but for the first time, she dared to believe it might lead to something better. And beside her, Michael, the cold billionaire, wondered if this girl might teach him the one thing he had forgotten long ago: how to love. The SUV moved smoothly through Lagos traffic, leaving the noisy junction behind. Amara sat quietly in the back seat, her hands folded over her scarf. She tried to steady her breathing, but her heart refused to calm. The leather seat beneath her felt too soft, too rich for someone like her. Every hum of the engine reminded her she was far from the life she knew. Michael sat beside her, his face turned toward the window. He had not spoken since giving the driver the order to go home. Silence wrapped the car, except for the low purr of the engine and the faint beeping of impatient horns outside. Amara wanted to ask where they were going, but her voice caught in her throat. She gripped her scarf tighter, whispering a prayer in her heart that she had not made a mistake. After nearly an hour, the SUV slowed. The air changed, quieter, cleaner, far from the chaos of the city center. The car turned into a long driveway. Amara could feel the change in the road beneath the tires, smooth stone instead of broken asphalt. Sir, we're home, the driver said. The car stopped. Michael stepped out first, then paused to allow Amara time. Gently, he touched her elbow. We've arrived. Let me guide you. Amara hesitated, then allowed his hand to steady her as she stepped onto the driveway. The ground beneath her feet was different, flat, polished, without dust. She lifted her head, sensing the wide space around her, the silence heavy with wealth. In front of her stood Michael's mansion, its tall glass windows glinting under the sun, though she could not see them. The building stretched like a palace, guarded by neat hedges and silent security men. This is where I live, Michael said, his tone flat, almost reluctant. Amara's lips parted. She could not imagine such a house. Her old home had cracked walls and a rattling zinc roof. Here, even the air smelled of flowers and polished stone. The large doors opened, and the cool breeze of air conditioning washed over her face. She stepped in cautiously. The floor beneath her was smooth marble. The scent of fresh polish lingered in the air. Be careful, Michael said. He guided her to a chair that felt cushioned and deep. Amara's fingers brushed along its surface. She felt both wonder and fear. Everything here was too grand, too far from her world. Michael stood a few steps away watching her. He was used to guests who admired his wealth loudly, who spoke in quick voices about the size of his house, the shine of his cars. But Amara only sat quietly, her hands folded, her face calm. You don't ask questions, he said finally. Amara tilted her head toward the sound of his voice. Should I, sir? Most people do. She shook her head slowly. I have learned not to expect too much. When you expect little, the world cannot hurt you as much. Michael's chest tightened at her words. He turned away quickly. The mansion was filled with silence. Expensive paintings hung on the walls. The wide staircase curved like a river of stone. Yet despite the beauty, it felt empty. Michael had lived here for years, surrounded by wealth but untouched by joy. He hosted meetings, signed contracts, built empires. But he ate his meals alone, walked the halls alone, slept in a bed too large for one. Amara sensed it. Though she could not see, she felt the weight of loneliness in the air, like a room that had been closed too long. "Why did you bring me here, sir?" she asked softly. Michael stopped, his hand tightening around the edge of a table. He searched for an answer. "Because your voice reminded me of something I lost." "Something I can't explain," Amara lowered her head. "I am only a poor girl, sir. I have nothing to give." He turned to face her. "You have more than most people I know." His voice was firm, but inside he fought a storm. Her presence unsettled him. She was not like the others who filled his world, those who chased him for money, power, or influence. She carried nothing but her voice, yet it pierced deeper than any words spoken in his boardrooms. The hours passed slowly. Michael ordered food to be brought, a plate of jollof rice, fried plantain, and chicken. Amara touched the edge of the plate with trembling fingers. She had never eaten such a rich meal. "Eat," Michael said simply. She whispered thanks and began slowly, tasting each bite with quiet wonder. Michael sat across from her, barely touching his own food. He watched her in silence, his cold exterior hiding the questions rising in his heart. Why did he care if this girl ate well? Why did her presence feel like a light in his dark house? For the first time in many years, Michael felt a stir of warmth, but he did not yet understand it. Amara, finishing her meal, folded her hands. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, she was safe. For tonight, the mansion's cold heart had made room for her song. Morning light streamed through the tall glass windows of Michael's mansion. For Amara, the brightness meant nothing, yet she felt the warmth of the sun on her skin as she sat quietly in the grand sitting room. Her hands folded over her scarf, she listened to the silence around her. It was not the silence of peace, but of emptiness. An emptiness that filled the house like a shadow. Michael entered the room, his footsteps steady and sharp on the marble floor. He wore another pressed suit, his scent carrying the crispness of expensive cologne. He was ready for business, yet his eyes, though cold to most, lingered briefly on Amara. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his voice controlled. "Yes, sir," Amara replied softly. She had slept on a bed softer than anything she had ever known, though the vastness of the room had made her uneasy. "Thank you." Michael nodded, then turned to leave. He paused at the door, something in him unsettled. He was not used to checking on anyone. Yet this girl's calm presence pulled at him in a way he could not explain. Days passed. Amara remained in the mansion, quiet but watchful in her own way. She listened to the rustle of staff moving about, to the ticking of the giant clock in the hallway, to the heavy silence whenever Michael returned from his business meetings. At first, Michael kept his distance. He dined quickly, spoke little, and spent long hours locked in his study. Yet Amara's patience was unshaken. She greeted him each morning with a soft, "Good day, sir," and offered thanks for every small kindness. One evening, when he returned late, he found her humming gently in the sitting room. The melody was simple but filled the mansion like fresh air. For a moment, Michael stood at the doorway, listening. Something stirred in his chest, sharp and unfamiliar. "You sing even here," he said, breaking the silence. Amara smiled faintly. "Yes, sir. My mother once told me that a song can chase away shadows." Michael's gaze hardened, though inside he felt strangely exposed. "Shadows do not leave so easily," he muttered. "Sometimes they do," Amara replied quietly. Over time, small changes began. When Michael sat to eat, Amara sometimes asked him about his day. At first, he brushed her off with short answers, but her gentle persistence softened him. He found himself telling her little things, about a meeting that frustrated him, about a man who betrayed a contract, about the endless hunger for profit in his world. Amara listened patiently, her face calm, her hands folded. "Money is good, sir," she said once, "but it cannot hold you when you are tired. It cannot laugh with you. It cannot wipe your tears." Michael stared at her, unsettled. Few dared to speak to him so plainly. Yet her words did not anger him. They stayed, circling in his mind long after she fell silent. One afternoon as they sat in the garden, Amara asked softly, "Sir, may I touch the flowers?" Michael hesitated. "If you wish." She reached forward, brushing her fingers against the petals. "They feel alive. Soft but strong. They do not see me, yet they give me their beauty." Michael frowned. "They are just flowers." She shook her head gently. "No, sir. They are reminders. Even small things can give joy." He watched her, feeling a strange ache in his chest. It had been years since he noticed the garden, though he passed it daily. Her blind eyes saw more than his ever had. Another evening, Michael returned to find Amara speaking with one of the maids. The young maid laughed softly, something rare in the mansion. Amara's presence seemed to bring warmth not only to him, but to the entire house. Later, when they were alone, Michael asked, "Why do you speak to everyone as if they are your friends?" Amara tilted her head. "Because they are people, sir. Even if they serve, they have hearts. A kind word can make a heavy day lighter." Michael fell silent. He thought of his boardroom, where smiles were masks and kindness was weakness. He realized how long it had been since he had spoken to anyone with such simple honesty. One night, Michael found himself unable to sleep. He rose and walked through the quiet halls until he heard it, Amara singing softly in her room. The melody floated through the air, gentle and full of peace. He stood outside her door, listening. For the first time in years, his heart softened. He thought of his late mother, of the warmth he had lost, of the emptiness that money could never fill. Without meaning to, Michael whispered into the dark hallway, "Teach me how you do it, Amara. Teach me how to feel again." He did not know she had heard his voice through the door. She smiled faintly in the dark and whispered back into the silence, "Love, sir. It begins with love." That night, both slept with lighter hearts. The billionaire slowly learning, the poor blind girl quietly teaching. The news spread like wildfire. Lagos society had sharp eyes and sharper tongues, and it did not take long before whispers reached the ears of Michael's family and business partners. A poor blind girl living in the mansion of one of Nigeria's most powerful billionaires? The story sounded unbelievable, yet it was true. Amara had been in Michael's house for weeks now, her gentle presence slowly softening his cold heart. She spoke to him with honesty, listened without judgment, and treated even the lowest staff with respect. For the first time in years, Michael felt life returning to the hollow mansion. But outside, the world was preparing to test them. At a business meeting in Victoria Island, Michael sat at the head of a long, polished table. Men in expensive suits leaned forward, their voices low but biting. "Michael," one of his senior partners began carefully, "we hear rumors. They say you have brought a beggar girl into your home." Another man added, "It is dangerous for your image. Investors are asking questions. What kind of man opens his doors to such a street girl?" Michael's eyes darkened. "Her name is Amara." The room went still at the sharpness of his tone. He rarely raised his voice, but his authority was absolute. "She is not a distraction," he continued. "My personal life is not your business. Focus on the contracts." The men exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared to push further. Yet in their silence, Michael felt their judgment. Later that week, Michael's aunt, Lady Ifeoma, paid a visit. She had raised him after his mother's death and carried herself with the pride of old wealth. She stepped into the mansion, her jewel towering, her jewelry flashing in the light. When she saw Amara sitting quietly in the lounge, her face twisted. "This is the girl?" she demanded, turning to Michael. "A blind beggar." "Michael, what disgrace is this?" Amara lowered her head, her fingers tightening on her scarf. Michael's jaw tightened. "She is under my care," Lady Ifeoma scoffed. "Care? Or are you bewitched by pity? You are a man of influence, Michael. Women of good standing seek your hand, and you bring this one into your house?" She waved her hand dismissively at Amara. "She will bring shame to our family." Michael's voice was steady but cold. "Enough. I owe you respect, Auntie, but not control." Amara stays, the older woman gasped, her pride wounded. She left in anger, her parting words sharp. If you continue with this madness, you will lose more than your name. Amara sat in silence, her heart heavy. When Michael turned to her, she whispered, Sir, maybe she is right. Maybe I should go. He shook his head firmly. No, you are not leaving. His voice softened. Not unless you want to. One hot afternoon, while Amara sat in the garden humming to herself, a familiar voice cut through the air. So this is where you've been hiding. Amara froze. It was Madame Nkechi, her stepmother. Behind her stood Chike and Nonso, their smirks sharp. You left us to suffer, Madame Nkechi snapped. And now I hear you are living like a queen in a palace. Is this how you repay the family that raised you? Amara's heart pounded. You did not raise me with love, she whispered. The woman's eyes blazed. Ungrateful child. Do you think you are better than us now? Pack your things. You are coming with me. That man will tire of you soon. Better you return now before you shame yourself further. Michael appeared then, his presence commanding. He stepped between Amara and her stepmother, his gaze like steel. She is not leaving, he said calmly. Madame Nkechi sneered. Who are you to decide? She belongs to us, Michael's voice dropped, sharp as a blade. She belongs to no one. And if you come here again to threaten her, I will make sure you regret it. Cheek and Nonso shifted uncomfortably. Their stepmother, though burning with anger, knew she was outmatched. With a hiss of frustration, she turned and stormed out. Amara trembled, her hands shaking. Michael reached out, gently steadying her arm. You are safe, he said. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Why do you fight for me, sir? I have nothing to give you. Michael hesitated, then whispered, You have already given me more than I knew I needed. But the battles were not over. Michael's businesses began to feel the strain of rumors. Newspapers hinted at scandal. Friends turned distant. Some investors quietly withdrew. One evening, Michael sat alone in his study, his head heavy in his hands. He had built his empire with cold discipline, yet now it trembled. Not because of a deal gone wrong, but because of a girl who sang at the roadside. When Amara entered, guided by the sound of his unsteady breath, she asked softly, Are you angry with me, sir? He lifted his gaze. His eyes were tired but not cold. Never with you, Amara. But the world is cruel. They want me to choose between power and... His words trailed off. Between what, sir? Michael's throat tightened. He had never said it aloud, even to himself. Finally he whispered, Between power and love. Amara's blind eyes filled with tears. She reached out, her trembling hand brushing his arm. Then choose love. Power will not hold you at night, sir, but love will. That night, Michael lay awake, staring into the dark. For the first time in years, he realized he had a choice, and in his heart, he already knew what he would choose. The dawn broke softly over Lagos, washing the city in golden dust. In the quiet of his mansion, Michael stood by the tall glass window, staring out at the sleeping city below. His mind was heavy with the weight of the choice before him, power or love, reputation or truth. For years he had chosen power, and it had given him wealth beyond imagination, but left him empty. Now for the first time, he had someone who had shown him warmth without asking for anything in return. Amara had no riches, no influence, no sight, yet she had given him more than all his wealth combined. She had given him peace. When Michael entered the dining hall that morning, Amara was already seated quietly, her hands folded over her scarf. She lifted her head at the sound of his footsteps. Good morning, sir, she said softly. Good morning, Amara. His voice was steadier than he felt. He sat opposite her, his plate untouched. For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Finally, he said, Amara, I must tell you something. My world is not kind. Since you came here, people have judged, whispered, and threatened. I may lose partners. I may lose respect. Amara lowered her head. I do not want to bring you pain. You haven't, Michael said firmly. His eyes softened. You have brought me life, and I have decided I will not let them take that away from me. That very day, Michael made his decision clear. He called for a press conference, something he rarely did. Journalists crowded the hall, their cameras flashing, their pens ready. Michael stood at the podium, tall and confident, his deep voice commanding silence. "You have heard rumors," he began. "Yes, it is true. There is a young woman in my life. Her name is Amara. She was born into hardship, she has no wealth, and she cannot see. Yet she has given me what money could not: love, compassion, and truth." The room buzzed with shock. Questions flew, but Michael raised his hand and the hall stilled again. "I will not be ashamed of her. She is more valuable to me than all the contracts and towers I have built. If anyone wishes to leave my side because of her, then leave. I will not change." The cameras clicked furiously. The words spread quickly across Lagos, across Nigeria. By nightfall, headlines screamed, "Billionaire chooses blind girl over power." When Michael returned to the mansion, Amara sat waiting, her hands trembling. She had heard the conference on the radio. As he entered, she stood, her blind eyes wet with tears. "You spoke of me to the world," she whispered. "Yes," he said simply, "because you are my world now." Amara's tears spilled freely. "I never thought anyone would fight for me, sir. All my life I was told I was nothing. But you," her voice broke, "you see me even though I cannot see you." Michael stepped closer, taking her hands gently. "You taught me how to love, Amara. You showed me that wealth without love is poverty, and I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that you are not nothing. You are everything." The days that followed were not easy. Some investors pulled away, some friends turned distant, but others admired Michael's courage. Ordinary people, hearing Amara's story, began to see her as a symbol of hope, a blind girl who had touched the heart of a billionaire. In the mansion, life changed. Laughter filled the halls again. Michael walked in the garden with Amara, describing the colors of the flowers she could not see. She sang for him at night, her melodies softening his long days. The staff adored her, for she treated them not as servants but as family. Months later, beneath the wide Nigerian sky, Michael and Amara stood before family and friends. Amara wore a simple white gown, her face radiant with peace. Michael, in his sharp suit, held her hands firmly. "I once lived in emptiness," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "But this woman filled my heart with love. Today, I vow to stand by her, to protect her, and to honor the gift she has given me." Amara smiled, her blind eyes glistening. "I once lived in darkness," she said softly, "but God sent me a man who became my light. I vow to walk beside him, even if I cannot see the road ahead, because my heart sees enough." The crowd erupted in joy as they were joined as husband and wife. Music filled the air, drums beating, voices rising in celebration. That night, as the city of Lagos glittered beyond the hills, Amara and Michael sat together in the quiet of the garden. The world was still full of challenges, but neither feared them anymore. "Do you regret it?" Amara asked softly. Michael turned to her, his eyes warm. "Never. You gave me what no one else could. You taught me how to love, and for that I will be forever grateful." Amara leaned against him, her heart steady. The mansion, once cold and silent, now felt alive. The poor girl and the billionaire, two souls from different worlds, had found each other, and together they stepped into a new dawn, one built not on money but on love.